From one company's expansion plans to a shift in a so-called Pirate King's fate. Mega Upload founder Dotcom is waiting for his extradition hearing. It's been delayed until next March in New Zealand. Dotcom was arrested back in January. He's accused of orchestrating the biggest copyright infringement conspiracy in U.S. history. Prosecutors and Dotcom's lawyers have agreed to delay after the High Court of New Zealand ruled that warrants used by police to search Dotcom's mansion and seize his property were overly broad and invalid. Joining us now to talk about the case is Ira Rofkin. He is the founder of the Rofkin Law Firm, and he is also Dotcom's lead defense attorney here in the U.S. Ira, welcome. Glad to have you here. So what do you make of the delay? Is this in Dotcom's favor or not?
Well, if everything was done perfectly, if New Zealand and the United States would have followed the law and not been involved in illegal search warrants or removing data in an illegal manner overseas, and if the government would have provided discovery in a timely manner, we'd of course preferred for there to be a speedy hearing, a speedy extradition hearing in New Zealand. That didn't happen. We have no choice but to have delay in order to have a fair hearing.
But it seems like the New Zealand High Court judge agrees with your point of view in that the warrants were, as we said, overly broad and basically overly aggressive.
That's exactly right. When the United States took data overseas without the court's permission, they violated the law. And they're also opposing providing transparency into the case, providing the evidence that supports the allegations so that Dotcom and the rest of the folks over there can get a fair defense. So this is being done out of desperation because they're appealing the orders by the New Zealand court to provide this discovery.
So, Ira, I mean, this brings up an interesting point because bail and extradition in New Zealand, as I understand it, are actually handled by local courts. Is that right?
They're handled by the Auckland courts, yes.
So how does that change, if anything? We know Dotcom wants to stay in New Zealand. Obviously, the U.S. wants him brought back to the U.S. to face charges here. But does this, how long can this go on, basically?
Well, if it was up to Dotcom and the other defendants who are in New Zealand, if they can get a fair playing field, if they can get funds freed up so they could pay defense lawyers in what the U.S. is calling the largest copyright case in history, if they can get bail, and if they can get a fair playing field, they would come to the United States in a second and go and have a jury trial right here. Because at the end of the day, there is no such thing as secondary criminal copyright infringement in the United States. And so we feel very confident that they are going to prevail.
So I saw one of Dotcom's tweets, which is that basically the U.S. tactics are dirty. Do you agree with that? It sounds like you do.
Well, they're dirty as a matter of law. Not only did they go ahead, issue a press release to start this case, and then shut down the entire Mega Upload site so consumers lost access to things that can never be considered infringing, like Microsoft Word documents and wedding photos. But then they went ahead and worked with New Zealand to violate the law on a search warrant and to violate the law on taking data offshore. The only wrongful acts that have been found as a matter of law in this case are ones against the United States and New Zealand.
As the most likely scenario, how do you see it now?
The most likely scenario is there'll be an extradition hearing in March. We have a motion to dismiss that will be taking place on July 27th in federal court in Virginia. And we are very hopeful that the appellate courts in New Zealand will affirm the lower court's rulings in favor of Mr. Dotcom.
Ira, how do you see this in the bigger picture, not necessarily with this case, but this whole idea of piracy, of copyrights being threatened? I mean, it is clearly a hot-button issue, which is why perhaps this has gotten as elevated as it has.
It is at its heart a political and economic issue. It's the Hollywood politics versus the Silicon Valley politics. And the best way to resolve these things is to have a balance so that tech companies can grow, so they're not going to be sued into oblivion, and so Hollywood could also have a stake and efficient economics.
And make money off creative rights.
Absolutely.
Ira, thanks very much for the time.
Thank you for having me.
Ira Rofkin joining us there, founder of Rofkin Law Firm and Dotcom's lead defense attorney here in the U.S.